Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel. So as we were discussing about the neurophysiology, we have seen the composition of the synapses in the last video. So we have seen that there are two types of synapses, that is the electrical synapse and the chemical synapse. Okay, so out of this, the chemical synapse, which involves a particular substance which will cross the synaptic cleft, which is a gap between the two neurons or the neuron and an effector cell. So it crosses this particular gap and binds to its receptor to transmit the particular information from one neuron to another neuron or from a neuron to an effector cell. Okay, so we have seen the mechanism by which this transmission of information may take place between the two neurons or between a neuron and an effector cell. Yes, we have seen that an electrical signal or an impulse, nerve impulse, may get transmitted to the next neuron or the effector cell and it will execute some output. Okay, now in today's video we shall consider the neurotransmitters which are involved in the chemical synapses and the receptors through which these neurotransmitters will mediate their actions. We have seen that these neurotransmitters will bind to certain receptors which will then result in opening of certain types of ion channels, and depending upon which ion channel is opening, it will decide whether the outcome is an excitatory transmission or inhibitory transmission. Okay, that is whether the depolarization will take place. So it is a excitatory type of transmission wherein the membrane potential will move towards the positive side. So there are chances of generation of the action potential. So it will result in generation of excitatory postsynaptic potential, EPSP, in case if there is a communication between the two neurons, and in case if the membrane potential becomes more negative. If it becomes more negative, it will result in hyperpolarization, so an inhibitory transmission will take place. That is, there are less chances of development of an action potential since the potential is moving towards the negative side. So such kind of potential which is developed, that's known as the inhibitory postsynaptic potential, IPSP, is what is generated, right? So these different types of transmissions which takes place, whatever it is, that will depend upon which type of neurotransmitter is released and to which receptor it is actually binding to and stimulating. Okay, so we will consider these two concepts in today's video, the various types of neurotransmitters which are actually responsible for the transmission of the information or the communication between the two neurons or a neuron and an effector cell. So also we will consider the receptors through which these neurotransmitters are mediating these actions. Okay, so to start with, we will consider the receptors, the different types of receptors for the neurotransmitters. Okay, so we shall consider the structure of the neurotransmitter receptors before going into the actual types of receptors. Okay, now as you can recall from this particular picture which depicts a chemical synapse, correct? Electrical synapse, there is a connection between the cytosol of the two neurons, right, is what we have seen through the connexons, gap junctions. Okay, but that is not the case with the chemical synapse. So there is a release of neurotransmitters into this cleft, which will cross this gap and it will find its receptors on the postsynaptic neuron, and it will bind to its binding site, and it will result in opening of certain ion channels. So these neurotransmitters, as a result of opening of certain ion channels, it will result in change in the postsynaptic potential. Okay, so each type of a neurotransmitter will have its own receptor. So it will bind to a specific type of receptor. So when this neurotransmitter binds to a correct receptor, an ion channel will open and a postsynaptic potential will be produced. That's what we have seen. The EPSP or IPSP will be generated in the postsynaptic cell or the postsynaptic neuron. Now, coming to the types of the receptors. Now, there are two types of neurotransmitter receptors. These are known as ionotropic receptors and the metabotropic receptors. Now, the basis for this particular classification is the location of the binding site and the ion channel. Whether the binding site and the ion channel both are the part of same protein, or whether they are part of different proteins. Okay, as in this case we have seen that the binding site for this neurotransmitter is present on the ion channel itself. Correct? Now what is this receptor? What will function as a receptor actually? We are all aware that the receptors which are present throughout the body, these are nothing but the proteins, right? In the composition of the cell membrane, you all must have studied about the different types of proteins which are present in the membrane. There are two types which either cross the membrane, these are present throughout the membrane, or these may be located externally on the surface of the plasma membrane. So accordingly, there are two types of proteins, that is the intrinsic protein and the extrinsic protein. So intrinsic proteins are the ones which traverse across the membrane, as this one. As you can see, this is the thickness of the membrane, but this particular receptor, okay, it is, or this particular protein which is functioning as an ion channel as well as a receptor, so it is traversing the entire thickness of the membrane. So such type of proteins are known as the intrinsic protein or the integral protein. There are certain proteins which float towards the exterior surface of the membrane. So such type of proteins are known as extrinsic proteins. Okay, so this particular protein which is functioning as the neurotransmitter receptor, it may itself be a ion channel. Okay, so now based on whether the binding site and the ion channels are the components of the same protein or whether it is a part of different proteins, the neurotransmitter receptors can be classified into two types, that is ionotropic and the metabotropic receptors. Coming to the first type, that is the ionotropic receptors. So this particular type of neurotransmitter receptor, it contains a neurotransmitter binding site as well as an ion channel. Okay, so the binding site for your neurotransmitter is located on that ion channel itself. So both the ion channel as well as the binding site, that is the receptor for your neurotransmitter, are the part of the same protein. Okay, so they are present on the same protein and generally these are ligand gated channels. What is a ligand gated channel? Some chemical or a ligand must bind to that ion channel. Remember the ion channels, the 4 types of ion channels which we have discussed under the electrical signals. So this is a type of channel wherein some chemical must bind to this channel, then and only then this particular channel will open. Okay, so an ionotropic receptor is actually a type of ligand gated channel. So the chemical binding site is also present on that same channel itself, right? So in the absence of neurotransmitter or that ligand or that chemical, the ion channel will remain closed. When the neurotransmitter binds to that receptor, the channel will open, the specific type of ions will move through. So it will result in change in the potential across the membrane, and it will either result in EPSP or IPSP, depending upon what type of ion is moving and which direction it is moving. So whether the inside of the membrane is becoming more negative or more positive, that will determine whether EPSP or IPSP is developed. Now let us take the example of this ionotropic receptors. Now there are certain excitatory neurotransmitters. Excitatory means what? These particular neurotransmitters, when they bind to their ion channel, it will result in opening of the ion channel and transfer of ions in such a way that EPSP will be generated. Okay, so these excitatory neurotransmitters will bind to specific types of ionotropic receptors that contains the cation, as you can see over here. So this is actually an ion channel, right? So it's an integral protein or intrinsic protein which is traversing across the membrane, as you can see, throughout the thickness, for the movement of the ions, because we have seen that the charged substances, they cannot cross the membrane as it is, right? So for that matter, ion channels are present. So this particular channel, as you can see, it has subunits, and in the middle there is an aqueous port. So when this particular channel is stimulated, these subunits will move apart and ions will flow through. Okay, so this is a type of ligand gated channel. Means what? There is a particular chemical which should bind to this particular ion channel, and then and only then it will open. Now this is a ionotropic receptor. Now why it is an ionotropic receptor? What is the meaning of ionotropic receptor? That's when the same protein has the binding site for the neurotransmitter as well as the ion channel. Is the condition satisfying over here? Yes, it is. Because the binding site for the ligand as well as the ion channel, both are present on the same protein. That's why this is an ionotropic receptor. Now this is an ionotropic acetylcholine receptor. Okay, so now whenever these cation channels open, they will allow specific type of ions to flow through, right? There are specific channels, sodium ion channels, potassium ion channels, or calcium ion channels. Okay, so when this acetylcholine binds to this particular channel, it will result in movement of the several positively charged ions. There are different channels, of course, meant for the movement of the different types of ions, but the flow of the sodium ion across the membrane, it is greater than that of calcium or potassium. Usually sodium is an extracellular ion, it will enter inside the cell. Calcium also extracellular ion, it will enter inside the cell. Potassium, it's an intracellular ion, so it will move out of the cell, because ions move across the electrochemical gradient, as we have seen, right? But the inflow of sodium is greater than that of either the inflow of the calcium ions and the outflow of the potassium ions. So what will be the net outcome of this? Sodium ions will move inside the cell. So what will happen to the resting membrane potential? What is the resting membrane potential? Now, as this channel is closed, this membrane is in the resting state. So the potential across this membrane will be resting membrane potential. That is, the inside of the membrane is more negative and the outside is more positive. But now as this ligand has bound to this particular receptor, what has happened? The channel has opened, sodium ions have flowed through. So positive charge had moved inside, so the inside of the membrane will become more positive. So what is it termed as? This particular state wherein the inside of the cell becomes more positive or less negative rather. That state is known as the depolarization. So it will result in the development of EPSP, excitatory postsynaptic potential. Here, if you can recall this one, in the graded potential we have seen. So the inside of the membrane has moved towards the positive side. Okay. So since it is taking it towards the threshold potential, this is known as the excitatory postsynaptic potential, because there are more chances of depolarization. Correct? Because as it crosses the threshold level, AP may get generated, action potential may get generated. Okay, so this is an excitatory transmission. Apart from this, there are inhibitory neurotransmitters also, which bind to the inotropic receptors that contain the chloride ion channels. So these will generate the IPSPs, the inhibitory postsynaptic potential, as a result of opening of this chloride channel. Now why this will happen? This is an example. So here this is a chloride channel which is now closed. But this is also an inotropic receptor. Why? Because the binding site of this ligand GABA, gamma aminobutyric acid, is present on the same protein which is carrying the ion channel. So it's an inotropic receptor. So now it's in the resting membrane potential. But as this GABA binds to the receptor, it will result in opening of the channel. So as a result of this, chloride ions will flow through. Now chloride ions, these are extracellular ions. So there will be an inward flow of this chloride ions. Now since a negative charge is moving into the cell, what will happen? It will result in the inside of the cell becoming more negative. So it will result in hyperpolarization. So it will develop the IPSP, inhibitory postsynaptic potential. So inside is becoming more negative now. So there are less chances of depolarization phase, less chances of AP generation, because threshold potential is somewhere around -55 and it is taking it towards the negative side. So there are less chances of development of AP. So this is an inhibitory type of transmission. Then the next type of receptor is the metabotropic receptors. So this is a type of receptor which contains the neurotransmitter binding site, but it lacks an ion channel as a part of its structure. Okay. So here the binding site for your neurotransmitter is present, but ion channel is not the component of same protein. Rather, metabotropic receptor, it is coupled to an ion channel, which is a separate protein, through another set of proteins called as G proteins, which are present in the membrane. So whenever this neurotransmitter binds to your metabotropic receptor, this G protein will either directly open or close the ion channel itself, or it may act indirectly by releasing another molecule called as a second messenger. So this will be released in the cytosol. This in turn will go and act on the ion channel to open or close that ion channel. So how these metabotropic receptors differ from the inotropic receptors? In that the neurotransmitter binding site and the ion channel, these are the components of different proteins. These are two different proteins. Unlike inotropic receptor, wherein both the binding site as well as the ion channel were the component of same protein. That is not the case with the metabotropic receptor, but it is coupled to certain ion channels. Say for example certain inhibitory neurotransmitters which bind to the metabotropic receptor which are linked to the potassium ion channels. So it will result in IPSP, right, which we have seen, because the potassium ions is moving out of the cell. So positive charge is moving out, so the inside will become more negative. So it will result in hyperpolarization, IPSP will be generated. Okay, so metabotropic receptor, it is a type of receptor. So this is a metabotropic acetylcholine receptor. So it is a type of receptor which has only the binding site for your neurotransmitter. But is there any ion channel over here? No. But this receptor, when it is stimulated, it can influence the ion channels, which is a part of different protein. And this coupling is through one more type of protein called as a G protein, which is a part of membrane protein. So either this G protein will directly open the channel, or it will release certain second messengers like CAMP, IP3DAG. So these are the examples of second messengers which in turn will go and open these particular channels. Okay. So basic difference between the two types of receptors, ionotropic and the metabotropic receptor, is the location of the binding site and the ion channel. So in case of ionotropic receptors, we have seen that the binding site and the ion channel are a part of same protein. But in case of metabotropic receptors, the binding site and the ion channels, these are present on two different proteins, and it is coupled through a third protein known as the G protein. That is not, this G protein is not involved in case of ionotropic receptors. So here, as in this case, potassium ion channels have been opened. So potassium ions are moving out of the cell. So inside of the cell is becoming more negative. So it is resulting in inhibitory transmission. Now, what will happen if these particular neurotransmitters remain in the cleft for a long period of time? Now, so far we have seen how the neurotransmitters are released, correct, in the cleft. So these are released, they will go and bind to their receptor, they will find their receptor, whatever type of receptor it may be. It may be an ionotropic receptor or metabotropic receptor. Whatever it is, it will bind, it will stimulate it, and accordingly it will result in the outcome. Depending upon whether it is an excitatory transmission or inhibitory transmission, EPSP or IPSP may be generated respectively. Now imagine if this neurotransmitter remains here for a long period of time, what will happen? If it doesn't get removed from here, what will happen? Obviously it will go on stimulating its receptor, right? Now, is it ideal to stimulate a receptor continuously, constantly, for a prolonged period of time? What will happen? What will happen? Suppose if you are given some work and you have been asked to work for hours together. Is it possible for you? Is it possible for you to work continuously? You need some rest, right? Your muscles will get tired, they will get fatigued. So they need some rest. So you feel tired, right? Otherwise, if you neglect it and if you go on working, what will happen? Your muscles will be fatigued and they may get damaged if they don't get sufficient rest. So same is the case with this type of transmissions. Now supposing if this neurotransmitter goes on stimulating these receptors, so whatever the outcome may be, the postsynaptic potential will go on developing, right? So a particular neurotransmission, it may result in excitation or inhibition constantly. So obviously what will happen? The outcome which it is producing that will get affected, right? So the function of this transmission may get affected if constant stimulation of these receptors is taking place, correct? So there should be some mechanism to stop this. Once the signal from this particular neuron gets transmitted to the postsynaptic neuron, so from presynaptic neuron the nerve impulse will get transmitted to the postsynaptic neuron. So once this function is over, there should be some mechanism to terminate the action of the neurotransmitters, right? So this particular termination of the action of the neurotransmitter, it takes place by this process of removal of the neurotransmitter from this particular site. Okay, so you need to remove this neurotransmitter from this area, or else it will constantly start stimulating the receptors and it may damage the transmission. So there are three basic ways by which this neurotransmitter can be removed from this particular cleft. That is by diffusion or enzymatic degradation or by uptake by the cells. Coming to the first one, that is diffusion. So diffusion, the term diffusion you are aware of. So it will result in movement of this neurotransmitters elsewhere. Correct? So whatever neurotransmitter is released over here, it will act on its receptor. And after some time what will happen? It will diffuse away from this area. So once it is not present in the vicinity, it will not be able to reach and bind to its receptor, right? So it will no longer result in producing the postsynaptic potential. So this is first way by which the removal of the neurotransmitter, the termination of the action of neurotransmitter will take place. Then the second method is the enzymatic degradation. So there are certain enzymes which specifically metabolize specific type of neurotransmitters. So these are inactivated through enzymatic degradation. Say for example, acetylcholine, which is a transmitter in the CNS as well as the PNS. So this can be degraded by the enzyme acetylcholine esterase. So this is a specific enzyme meant for hydrolysis of the acetylcholine. So this enzyme will break down the acetylcholine into acetate and choline in the synaptic cleft itself. So this membrane, this particular enzyme, it is present in this particular synaptic cleft. So whatever acetylcholine is released, it will be hydrolyzed. The third way by which the termination of action will take place is uptake by the cells. So certain neurotransmitters are taken back by the same neuron which has released them, and it is actively transported. It is an active transport, so it requires an energy, right? So that neurotransmitter which is released, it will be taken back by the same neuron which has released it. So this particular process of uptake of the neurotransmitter, released neurotransmitter back into the same neuron, is known as reuptake. Why reuptake? Because the same neuron which has released is taking it back. That's why it is termed as reuptake. So once it is taken back, it may be metabolized or it may be stored again within the vesicles for future use. So these are the three ways by which the termination of action or the removal of the neurotransmitter will take place. That is diffusion, enzymatic degradation, and the uptake by the cells. Then coming to the next part, that is the neurotransmitters. Now let us talk about what are the different types of neurotransmitters and what are the examples of the neurotransmitters and what role they play in the body. So there are many substances which have been identified as neurotransmitters or being suspected as neurotransmitters. Still some neurotransmitters are being studied. Around about 100 substances are known. or suspected as the neurotransmitters. So what will happen? These neurotransmitters either bind to the receptor, open the or close the ion channel, or some may act slowly, some have quick action if the binding site and the ion channel it is present on the same receptor or the same protein. It will have quick action. That is in case of ionotropic receptor. Some other neurotransmitters we have seen that they act via second messenger. So metabotropic receptor. So they will act a little slowly because they have to release the second messenger that will go and bind to the ion channel and open or close it. So whatever the type of receptors may be, either excitation or inhibition of the postsynaptic neuron will take place. We have seen depending upon the type of ion channels which is open. Okay. Now apart from this, a neurotransmitter may also act as a hormone. There are specific cells within the brain, neurosecretory cells. So certain neurons, they also secrete the hormones which act as neurotransmitter also. Okay, now coming to the types of the neurotransmitter. There are two basic classes into which the neurotransmitters are divided into, that is small molecule neurotransmitters and the neuropeptides. Okay. So we'll begin with the small molecule neurotransmitters. So these include examples like acetylcholine, amino acids, certain amino acids which are present in the body, they may also act as neurotransmitters, or certain biogenic amines, ATP or other purines. Then the nitric oxide, carbon monoxide, all of these may act as the small molecule neurotransmitter. So as the name implies, their structure, they have a small structure. So that's why these are categorized together. So coming to the first one, that is the acetylcholine. ACH is the accepted short form for this. A capital, C capital and H small. So this is the best studied neurotransmitter which is released in the peripheral nervous system as well as the central nervous system. And this neurotransmitter can act as an excitatory neurotransmitter as well as inhibitory neurotransmitter, depending upon where exactly it is released. Say for example, this neurotransmitter can act as an excitatory transmitter at the neuromuscular junction, because the release of ACH, it will result in binding to the sodium ion channels. So sodium ion channels will open, sodium will inflow, depolarization will result, and it will result in generation of an muscle action potential. Whereas it can also act as an inhibitory neurotransmitter by binding to certain metabotropic receptor which contain the potassium ion channel. So for example, heart rate, it is slowed down via the action of the vagus nerve, that is the 10th cranial nerve. So ACH is the mediator over here to slow down the heart rate. So here the action is inhibitory in nature, just slowing down the heart rate. Okay, so that's the structure of acetylcholine. So as the name implies, there are two parts, the acetate and the choline. Now this particular neurotransmitter, its action can get terminated by enzymatic inhibition or enzymatic degradation, as we have seen as the example also. Acetylcholine esterase, ACHE is the accepted short form. There are choline esterase, is a group of enzymes which is present which hydrolyze the esters. This is an ester, right? So this particular enzyme choline esterase, it exists in two types. Acetylcholine esterase, which is a specific enzyme for hydrolysis of acetylcholine, and there is butyrylcholine esterase or pseudocholine esterase, which hydrolyzes other esters. So this particular enzyme acetylcholine esterase, it inactivates the acetylcholine by splitting it into acetate and choline. So it is split over here at this point. So acetate and the choline is set free. So this choline, it is recycled. It is taken back by the neurons and it is recycled. That is, new molecules of ACH are synthesized utilizing this choline. And acetate, it is broken down into carbon dioxide and water. And the next type of small molecule neurotransmitter is the amino acids. So these amino acids, these also act as a neurotransmitters in the CNS. So there are several examples. Say for example glutamate, this is the structure, or aspartate, or glutamic acid and aspartic acid. These are excitatory transmitters. So certain excitatory neurons in the CNS, almost the half of the synapses in the brain, they communicate via the release of the glutamate. Okay, so glutamate, it will bind to certain ionotropic receptors and it will result in opening of the cation channel. So mainly it is the sodium ion channel. So it will result in the excitation. Depolarization will take place. EPSP will get generated over here. And the termination of action, it takes place via reuptake. So whatever released glutamate or aspartate, it is taken back by the same neurons. So glutamate transporters are available, so they will take the glutamate back into the same neuron and it is stored and used for the future use. Apart from these, glutamate as well as aspartate, there are two more transmitters, that is gamma aminobutyric acid or GABA as it is called as, and the glycine. So these two amino acids, these are inhibitory neurotransmitters. Glutamate and aspartate, these are excitatory because they generate the EPSP. Whereas the GABA and glycine, these generate the IPSP because they bind to ionotropic receptors which open the chloride channels. Remember what is the outcome of opening of the chloride channels? Chloride ions, they will move inside the cell and it will become more negative. So it will result in hyperpolarization. So IPSP is generated. So AP will not be generated. That's why it is an inhibitory transmitter. Okay. So it's the GABA which is acting at most of the inhibitory sites in the CNS. Okay. Almost 1/3 of all the brain synapses, they use the GABA as the transmitter. And anti-anxiety drugs like diazepam, they enhance the action of GABA, and that's how they act as inhibitory drugs, and they will result in suppression of the anxiety and tension. So they will calm down the patient. Apart from GABA, glycine also binds to the ionotropic receptors which open the chloride channel. So it will also act as an inhibitory neurotransmitter. So about half of the inhibitory synapses in the spinal cord, it utilizes glycine and the remaining utilizes the GABA. So these are the two main inhibitory transmitters which are present in the CNS. And the next type of small molecule neurotransmitter is the biogenic amines. Now these biogenic amines, and what are these biogenic amines? These are synthesized from the amino acids. So certain modifications and decarboxylation will result in formation of the biogenic amines. Decarboxylation means removal of the carboxyl group. If you can recall amino acids, they have an amino terminal and an carboxy terminal, right? So this carboxy terminal, it is removed and it may result in production of the biogenic amines by some sequential reactions which are catalyzed by specific types of enzymes. So there are four main types of biogenic amines which are present in the neurotransmission, which is involved in the neurotransmission in the nervous system. So these include norepinephrine, epinephrine, dopamine and the serotonin. These are the ones. Norepinephrine, epinephrine, dopamine and the serotonin. Okay, so most of these will bind to the metabotropic receptors And there are specific receptors. The type of receptors is specific to the specific type of biogenic amine. Now, either the excitation or inhibition may take place based on which type of metabotropic receptor is being stimulated. Now, let us consider what is the role of each of these neurotransmitters. Norepinephrine or NE. This is also known as noradrenaline, or NA is the accepted short form. This is the main neurotransmitter at the sympathetic system also. So this plays an important role in the arousal, that is awakening from your deep sleep or dreaming or regulating the mood. Apart from this, the epinephrine, which is the next type of neurotransmitter, it is also known as adrenaline. ADR is the accepted short form. A capital, D small, R small. So this also acts as a neurotransmitter. Now both these norepinephrine as well as epinephrine, these also serve as the hormones. Okay, so it acts as both the neurotransmitter as well as an hormone. It is also produced by the cells of the adrenal medulla. So it's a hormone which is secreted by the adrenal gland, which is released into the blood. So it's an endocrine gland. Okay, so remember these norepinephrine as well as the epinephrine. They act as neurotransmitter as well as the hormone. And the third type of biogenic amine is the dopamine. So this is involved in the emotional responses, addictive behaviors, because dopamine have the reinforcement action. So it will give the pleasurable experience which is seen in the addicts. It is also released as a result of action of the nicotine which is present in the tobacco. Reinforcement which is given, the sense of well-being which is produced, that is due to the release of the dopamine. Apart from that, dopamine is also involved in regulating the skeletal muscle tone, movement which is regulated by the contraction of the skeletal muscle, that is also mediated by dopamine. So in case of Parkinson's disease, wherein the dopamine, the level of dopamine in the CNS is low, it will result in muscular stiffness because it is associated with the regulation of the skeletal muscle contraction. So here the degeneration of such neurons which release the dopamine, it will result in Parkinson's disease, and one of the characteristic feature of Parkinson's disease is muscular stiffness, rigidity, hypokinesia, movement difficulty is seen. That's because of the lack of dopamine. On the contrary, schizophrenia is a condition, it's a psychological condition wherein there is excess level of dopamine. So the treatment lines for both these conditions will be, here you need to give the dopamine supplements, whereas here you need to block the action of dopamine. So D2 receptors are used over here, receptor blockers are used over here in this case, and in this case you need to give the supplement of the dopamine. Now, these three neurotransmitters or biogenic amines, that is norepinephrine, epinephrine and dopamine, these are collectively called as catecholamines. This is the collective term given to these group of neurotransmitters. Now why these are called as catecholamines? That's because of their structure. So you can see the structure of all these three. It is having an amino group here in this case, and it has a benzene ring which has two hydroxy groups attached to it. So this particular structure, it is called as a catechol ring, which is composed of 6 carbons and 2 adjacent hydroxyl groups. So it is known as the catechol. So that's the reason why it is called as catecholamines. So it has a catechol as well as amino group. So that's why it is called as catecholamines, which are synthesized from amino acid tyrosine. And the termination of the action is via reuptake. So these are taken back into the neurons which have secreted them, and that's how the termination of the action will take place. Further, they may be even broken down by the enzymatic degradation. There are two enzymes which are available, catechol-orthomethyl transferase or COMT and the monoamine oxidase or MAO. So these are the two enzymes involved in the metabolism of the catecholamines, that is norepinephrine, epinephrine and the dopamine. Then the fourth biogenic amine is the serotonin. Serotonin, if you can see, the ring structure is different. That's why it is not classified along with these. Only Na, then the adrenaline, epinephrine and norepinephrine. These are also known as adrenaline and noradrenaline. Okay, so adrenaline, noradrenaline, dopamine. These are known as catecholamines. Whereas serotonin, which is a fourth type of biogenic amine, which also acts as a neurotransmitter, it is known as 5-hydroxytryptamine. 5-hydroxytryptamine. So this is usually found in the Raphe nucleus, and it is involved in the sensory perception, temperature regulation, control of mood, appetite and induction of the sleep. Then the next type of small molecule neurotransmitter is the ATP and other purines. So the characteristic ring structure which is present in the adenosine part of the ATP. ATP is adenosine triphosphate, right? There are 3 phosphate. We have seen the generation of the ATP. So there are 3 high energy phosphate groups which are attached to this adenosine. So adenosine has basically the purine ring. So this adenosine or its triphosphate or diphosphate or monophosphate derivatives, that is ATP, ADP or AMP, all these are excitatory neurotransmitters in the CNS as well as the PNS. So these are stored in the synaptic vesicles along with other neurotransmitters. So when this synaptic vesicles release their content, so along with the other neurotransmitters, ATP is also released along with that. Generally ATP is found in association with the acetylcholine in the same vesicle. So when ACH is released, along with it ATP is also released. It is also acting as a neurotransmitter. And the next one is the nitric oxide, NO. So this is again an excitatory neurotransmitter which is secreted in brain, spinal cord or from the adrenal glands, even the nerves which are supplying to the penis. Okay, and it has widespread actions not only in the CNS but throughout the body. Okay, so this is the structure of nitric oxide, NO. That is, there is only single nitrogen. Whereas in case of nitrous oxide, which is laughing gas, it has 2 nitrogens, N2O. Okay. Now this particular nitric oxide, it is synthesized from amino acid arginine, and this reaction is catalyzed by this enzyme nitric oxide synthase. So this is involved in the synthesis of the nitric oxide from the arginine. Now so far whatever neurotransmitters which we have covered, these are synthesized and stored in the synaptic vesicles, right? But that is not the case with nitric oxide. This is not synthesized in advance or packed in the synaptic vesicles. Rather, these are synthesized on demand, and they act very quickly, and they act for a very brief period. That's because it is a highly reactive free radical. So it will act even for less than 10 seconds, after which it will combine with oxygen and water to form nitrates or nitrites. Okay, and being highly lipid soluble in nature, it will quickly diffuse into the neighboring cells to result in formation of cyclic GMP. So that's how the signal will get transmitted by the nitric oxide. Okay, and it is thought to play a role in memory and learning. Next one is the carbon monoxide, CO. So like nitric oxide, this particular neurotransmitter is also not produced in advance or packed in synaptic vesicle. So this is also released as and when it is required. And it is also an excitatory neurotransmitter which has very brief action. So this particular carbon monoxide, it may protect the brain against excessive neuronal activity. It may be involved in the dilatation of the blood vessels, memory, olfaction, that is sense of smell, vision, thermoregulation, insulin release, and anti-inflammatory activities. So these are the roles which are played by carbon monoxide as a neurotransmitter. So this is to do with the small molecule neurotransmitters, and the second type of neurotransmitters is the neuropeptides. So this comprises of 3 to 40 amino acids which are joined together or linked together by the peptide bond. That's why these are known as neuropeptides. So these are present in the CNS as well as in the PNS, and it can be either excitatory or inhibitory depending upon which type of metabotropic receptors it is binding to. Okay, so these neuropeptides, these are formed and these are stored in the vesicles, in the axon terminals, and as and when required these may be released, and this may act as the neurotransmitter as well as certain neuropeptides also act as hormones also elsewhere in the body. Okay, so as the scientists were discovering the receptors for the opioid drugs, that is morphine and heroin, how these neuropeptides have been evolved. Okay, so as the scientists were discovering about the receptors for this morphine, heroin, so they came across some natural substances which also bind to the same receptors, and this led to the discovery of the first neuropeptide, that is enkephalin. So it comprises of 2 molecules which contain 5 amino acids in a particular chain. Okay, and this particular substance was even 200 times more stronger as far as analgesic action is considered. Morphine is an analgesic, centrally acting analgesic, which abolishes the pain. Okay, so it's a pain relieving drug. So enkephalins, these are the normally released analgesics which are present in the body. So these are known as opioid peptides. So as the search continued, 2 more opioid peptides were discovered, that is the endorphins and the dynorphins. So these are considered to be the body's natural painkillers. If you consider the acupuncture, you must be aware of what acupuncture is. So it will result in relieving of pain in certain areas if you press across certain points in the body. Why it is happening? It's because of the release of these opioids, natural opioids in the body. That's how they relieve the pain. Okay. Apart from this analgesic property, these neuropeptides may also be involved in memory and learning, feeling of pleasure or euphoria, sense of well-being, controlling of the body temperature, regulating of the hormones that affect the puberty or sexual drive or reproduction, mental illness such as depression or schizophrenia. Apart from these opioid peptides, there are one more type of neuropeptide, that is substance P. So this is released in response to a painful stimulus. So this is helping in transmitting the pain related input from the peripheral pain receptors towards the central nervous system for the perception of the pain. So why do you feel that pain? That's because of the release of this substance P, which is helping in transmission of that signal. And how enkephalins and endorphins, which are opioid peptides, these are natural painkillers, how they act? By suppressing the release of the substance P. So that's how they produce the analgesic property. Okay, so this is the example of the neuropeptide, that is substance P. So as you can see that it is composed of several amino acids. So particular sequence will form the substance P. Okay, arginine, proline, lysine, okay, and so on. So this to do with the neurotransmitters. Now a small concept, that is the neural circuits. We have seen how the signal gets transmitted from one neuron to the next neuron, right, via the electrical or the chemical synapses. Okay, so we have seen different neurotransmitters, different types of receptors which are involved in transmission of the signal. Now in our body there is a series of neurons which will carry the same signal, right? So it's not that only one neuron will directly reach up to the CNS, or only one neuron will come out of the CNS and directly it will reach the effector. There may be a number of neurons which may involved in the signal transmission. So accordingly there are different neural circuits, different types of neural circuits. The first one is a diverging circuit. As you can see, why it is called as diverging? Because the input is coming from one neuron and it is being spread to a number of neurons. So it is diverging. Second one is a converging circuit. That is, the input from several neurons is sent to the same neuron. That's why it is converging circuit. This one is the reverberating circuit. Now why it is reverberating? Now as you can see, what is happening? This is the input. But is the input, it is traveling straight towards the output? No. What is happening in between? As you can see that, what is this? Branching of the axon. It is called as collaterals, right? Parallel branching of this axon may take place. So here what will happen? The signal which is being transmitted over here, it will also get transmitted in this direction. So here what is happening? Another neuron is getting the same signal, but in which direction it is taking it? Back to the previous neuron. As you can see over here, axon collaterals. So the same impulse is being retransmitted in a particular area. So it is getting circulated over here. So that's known as the reverberating circuit. And the fourth type of neural circuit is the parallel after discharge circuit. So as you can see, this is the input, but what has happened? It is parallelly getting transmitted through more than one pathways and it is reaching the same output. That's why it is known as parallel after discharge circuit. Okay, so this is to do with the neurotransmitters. They are different types of receptors. So we have seen neurotransmitters. There are two types: small molecule neurotransmitters, the neuropeptides, and the receptors again of two types: ionotropic receptors and the metabotropic receptors, depending upon whether the receptor and the ion channel are located on the same protein or whether they are part of different proteins. And also the termination of action of the neurotransmitter. So this is to do with the electrophysiology of the neurons. So with this general discussion, we will begin with the central nervous system from the next video. Stay tuned. Thank you for watching.